Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is my favorite game of all time, so naturally I find myself thinking about this game and its many facets quite a lot, especially with Sugar Conway's Let's Play running throughout a whole ass year. I never managed to get 100% on XC2 because the game has a million fetch quests and it took like 2 years for any decent effort to be made to list item locations on the wiki. Naturally, because of this, I failed to complete a lot of affinity charts, so with Sugar Conway's LP, I was experiencing a lot of blade quests for the first time. With this new experience in tow, I've decided to rank every blade based on how much I like them as a character and how well their story is written. How good of a character is in gameplay is not a factor in this list, even remotely. I'll talk about gameplay only when it serves interesting ludonarrative synergy, and that's it. I'll only be talking about blades you get by resonating with the core crystal as an item. This eliminates this whole list of blades up on screen. The reason I am using this rule is because it's the simplest way to eliminate a lot of story blades, along with the challenge mode guest stars and Poppy Buster. Naturally, all these characters have a lot more to go off of, so it feels kind of unfair ranking them in the same leagues as blades who only get half-hour-long quest lines. I'm also discounting all the New Game Plus exclusive blades because none of them have blade quests, so I don't really have anything to go on with them. This video has major spoilers for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It spoils all the blade quests, and I make vague allusions to the main story throughout. This video will probably be incomprehensible if you haven't at least seen the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 through to the end. If you haven't done that, I cannot recommend playing this game enough, given that you watched Sugar Conway's video explaining why the tutorials are crap and teaching you about the mechanics better than the game ever did. With that out of the way, let's start this baby off with...
Military intelligence!
I can confidently say that Newt is the worst character design in the entire game. This looks like an NSFW parody of an existing character design. Her outfit is modeled after a military uniform. Why is she wearing less clothes than Mithra? Why do the outlines of the weird scattered pieces of what I can only assume to be metal glow? Why are none of her vitals covered? Super regeneration or not, you should cover your vitals. Not only is her character design atrocious, but her personality is bland as hell. She loves the military. She's a hard ass in one scene and one scene alone for the sake of instigating conflict. She's extremely cocky, also for a single scene to start conflict. That's it. She volunteers to help out whenever she can, but that's a trait that the vast majority of blades have. It doesn't set her apart in any way from any better characters. This army guy is also a pretty boring source of conflict. Why does Morag seem to react with fear to this guy's presence? She's the Architect Damn Special Inquisitor. The only person of power over her is the Emperor himself. She is on a completely separate hierarchy to this guy. I understand exercising caution to not make more trouble, but that is not the impression I got from these scenes. Also, why do the soldiers who try to kill Emperor Nile at the end of the quest not speak a single line? This would have been a good moment to maybe show some lore for Bryonak or Lindworm, but they just silently fail to assassinate the Emperor. Absolutely forgettable. These Ardanian soldiers should be ashamed of themselves. Probably my ahem. Second biggest problem with Newt is that this quest doesn't really feel like anything specific to her. She repairs the Titan weapon, I guess, but that's a small part of her quest. Nothing else feels like it's a problem that she in particular is motivated or capable to solve. Hell, this quest feels like it would be the perfect quest for Aegean if he got one. He has an enormous sense of duty to the Emperor and more Ardain, so it makes sense that he'd want to do all of this, from helping with training to doing the security drill. My point is, any character would volunteer to kill the monsters attacking the Titan ship, or participate in the drill in Hard High Palace. Nothing about this quest is specific to Newt. Newt is the most generic character she could have been. She feels like all her personality ever was some notes on her character design.
Are you trying to make furries even sexier?
Nim is legit the only blade I find annoying consistently. Her constant referring to Ket and Sunny is supposed to be cute, but it really does not come across that way, even remotely. Her primary personality trait is referring to characters who only exist to sit on her shoulders and do literally nothing else. Her design has way too many colors. It looks kind of alright in the artwork, but her model is ugly as sin. It's an absolute visual mess. Her quest is also really goddamn boring. You mostly just run around and make checks for Nim's quest skill, and the quest NPCs have absolutely no personality. They're like what if the food served in a high school cafeteria was a character. Nim ranks at the bottom because she has nothing I like, along with several things that I actively dislike. Every blade in XC2 has a gimmick to their character, and Nim's is extremely shallow and nothing interesting ever happens with it. Her heart-to-heart is literally dedicated to pointing out that a character who can talk to animals is really interesting, but Nim can't talk to animals. She can only talk to phonics specifically, and nothing else.
I am that.
Godfrey is generic as hell. He's a loud anime boy with a strong sense of justice. He looks like he's made of fire and talks about fiery passion for justice, but he's an ice blade. This is clearly a joke, but it's not very funny. Also, what the fuck was the villain of his quest even trying to accomplish? Does he just find people with strong senses of justice just to knock them down? He hears that Godfrey has a strong sense of justice and commits murder to try and get him angry? This is the absolute dumbest motivation for a villain I've ever seen. It's entirely unexplained why he's doing this, and Godfrey points it out multiple times. I feel like this guy is what you get when you make an unfinished outline into a story with 0 modifications. Maybe this guy would have been a remotely functional antagonist if, say, during Godfrey's Merc missions, you bust some operation this guy's been doing, and his motive was revenge. Merc missions lead into quests several times, like with Zenobia or Izami, and Godfrey even has a set of Merc missions for his affinity chart. But this guy is motivated broadly against a specific emotion like a cartoon supervillain. This guy is hollow, his goal is hard to infer at best, and his motive is non-existent. He's nothing except a poor excuse for an antagonist. I guess that makes him the perfect foil for Godfrey then. Zing!
He's about to hit a chestnut tree.
Florin is a character I really dislike because he is part of a trend of characters I don't like in Japanese media, where characters have some parallels with transphobic ideas of being transgender. In all fairness, Florin is nowhere near the worst example of this trope. I mean, how the hell can I say that when Naoto is right there? I don't think Florin's parallels to transphobic mindsets are intentional or even malicious, but a lack of ill intent does not stop these parallels from existing and making me incredibly uncomfortable. My low opinion of Florin is also because the writing of his Blade quest is really bad. These mercenaries that set fire to the trees in Oriya are super malicious to Florin for no particular reason. They would need more than a pants-wetting amount of gold on the line for it to be worth the amount of effort they're putting into this job. Them committing arson is most definitely breaking laws in the kingdom of Oriya too. The extremes these guys went to just broke my suspension of disbelief like a goddamn twig. Just like the guy from Godfrey's quest, these guys give the distinct impression that this quest was straight up not finished being written when the cutscenes were made. I want to preface this entry by saying that I am judging Cosmos by her portrayal in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Cosmos from Xenosaga is a canonically different character, thus Xenosaga does not factor into my judgment. I've also never played Xenosaga, but that's beside the point. I'm sure Cosmos is a much better character there. Cosmos is a pretty standard robot character. She's highly logical, doesn't understand emotions, and is incredibly smart, and the game seems oddly determined to not develop her further. Her heart-to-heart is focused on the world tree, not on Cosmos herself, and she takes a back seat for most of her own Blade quest. The initial conflict is about neutralizing the artificial blades made by Torna. That's a neat premise for a quest, but it honestly did not have to be Cosmos' quest, or a Blade quest at all for that matter. Hell, this conflict would work better for a plot focused on Tora and Poppy. Torna's artificial blades are personal for both of them. Cosmos does not have the same motivation. This quest then shifts the focus to babysitting Zeke's cousin. Estelle makes 2 Ox cores as upgrades for Cosmos to make it so she can control her abilities easier, but that wasn't a significant source of conflict to begin with. The supposed lack of control was just Cosmos missing some of her shots, missing 4 out of 18 artificial blades over the course of 2 encounters. That was less of a source of conflict and more an in-universe reason for a fight to take place in gameplay. I'd maybe buy it if some stray shots had caused something bad to happen on the Titan below this area, but it didn't. Estelle primarily exists to make a homage to Xenosaga, and everything else she does serves to make this quest pretty terrible. The biggest issue I have with Cosmos' character is that her personality is a cheap copy of Harold's, and she isn't given enough focus in her own goddamn quest to break out of that. It doesn't help that they act as if Cosmos is destructive like Harold is, but that is never true. We never see consequences for her actions beyond spooking the locals. She's a super passive character in her own quest, when the whole point of Blade Quest is to give a Blade focus. Cosmos is a painfully mediocre character in XC2, and if I had actually played Xenosaga, I think my opinion of her in this game would fall even lower.
A-G-A-T-B. Don't forget it.
Agate feels like a character the writers of Xenoblade 2 didn't know what to do with. She's got a fear of bugs, and that is really just a comedic thing that comes up when you mine bugs on accident in her Blade quest, and when you finally try and get the Agate and the dead Tornin Titan. I don't feel like she ever really goes anywhere.
Let's go say hi to Senpai!
Azami is alright. I overall feel pretty neutral about her. I don't find her comedy funny very often, but at least she's not so unbearably unfunny that I legit hate her. I have this picture of Nim up on screen for no reason in particular. I like how Azami's quest touches a bit on Blades having unique powers in the universe. That kind of goes unacknowledged a lot of the time, so it's neat to see it get some press. Azami also provides a neat twist on the relationship between Driver and Blade, but I personally could not care less for her being a yandere. That trope is honestly not as interesting of a concept as a lot of writers seem to think it is. I guess being a kid when Yandere Simulator was getting a lot of press kind of burned me on that front.
But hey, that's just a theory.
Since everything about Praxis and Theory happens together, I'll talk about the whole questline here. I really like the second quest in their questline. I adore the moment where Theory realizes that no matter what happens to Praxis, she'll never have the same thing that they once had back. So Theory kills her current driver to stop him from ending what Praxis has now. It's a really powerful moment, just a terrific piece of self-actualization and realizing that her driver didn't care for her, just what she could do. Then Theory ends up being really boring when you reawaken her core. The only interesting thing about her is lost because she lost her memories, and she just ends up being a pretty simple character for Praxis to bounce off of. I rank her really low because once she becomes a party member, she fails some fantastic potential, and that failure also serves to bring down Praxis. Really, if Theory maintained her status as a really good character after you reawaken her, they'd both be in the top 10. But instead, we get this.
Ice, 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 ice.
I'm not gonna rag on Dahlia's design because that point has been talked to death already. Aside from a bad character design, I guess she's sort of neat. I like how she has the event in Tantal's main plaza, and her quest builds on that. I don't have much to say on Dahlia, really. Nothing stands out about her except this meme of a character design.
I eat, John. It's what I do.
I can praise Boris for having more depth than simply eat food and talk about eat food. However, that depth isn't very interesting. His philosophy, explained in his heart-to-heart, is pretty plain. The plot of his Blade quest is pretty neat, but the conflict loses a lot of punch when you aren't invested in Boris as a character. I also really fucking hate the voice line for his salvaging mastery. I don't like playing games with the sound off, and that voice line was enough to make me do so. Aside from that, the DLC quest with him and Gorg was pretty cool.
I'm an able blade, and I'm ready to do my part.
Egon has a very weird role in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. He is entirely unimportant to the story, but he is considered a legendary blade. He has got the 3 orangey yellow diamonds instead of the 2 pinkish ones. Because of this, he has no blade quest. I have no idea why this is done for him in specific, because Wolfrack is in nearly the exact same situation and he has a blade quest and is a rare blade. Wolfrack is attained after the Elder Arachno fight, and Egon is the same deal with the Gigarosa fight. As far as I know, you don't even have to awaken Egon either, and he's in like 2 story cutscenes before you get his core. Still, he only had a few lines before Niall fucking died, and then, Egon is a weird case. He isn't even relegated to the background like Dromark, he's just straight up not there. He gives me the impression that Egon's side content was dropped to meet deadlines in production or something. Egon is boring. That part of him is so pervasive that he doesn't even break out of it during Torn of the Golden Country, where he has a lot less characters to share the spotlight with. Every so often in a cutscene in Torna, they come up with a fantastic new character trait for him, but it only ever lasts for like 1 scene. This happens at least 3 times I can think of. Water embodies flexibility, not inconsistency. Telos, much like Cosmos, has a quest that doesn't do a good job of giving her focus as a character. Telos has a lot more personality, and it's on full display here, but the conflict, if you can even call it that, doesn't challenge her. It's not anything that plays to her strengths or her weaknesses. It's also another situation of using a blade to mop up an unresolved plot thread from the finale. Both Cosmos and Telos' quests focus on a conflict that doesn't end up amounting to anything climactic. These quests honestly feel like they should have been their own self-contained stories, with the Blade quest being something actually suited to the characters who were stuck with them. I mainly rank Telos higher than Cosmos because Telos at least has a personality to show when Cosmos doesn't.
The position of Jupiter says that you should spend the rest of the week face down in the mud.
Cassandra is just kinda there for me. I have absolutely nothing to say about her other than that her design is cool and I like the lore that her previous driver was an up on. That's pretty epic.
Join the occult, Dad!
Vale is funny, and I like how she stops pretending to be indifferent to anything when the chips are down. She acts disinterested all the time, but when it comes to it, she doesn't want a bunch of Nopon kids to hurt themselves because they got involved in the occult. I also quite like how her energy in this quest is legit concerned about these kids, as well as being angry at them for not being involved with the real occult stuff and worshipping a regular monster in equal measure. Good character writing. I also like how she just likes making textiles, and that is entirely unimportant to her quest line. It's cool when characters just have hobbies.
I'm just gonna pretend no one said anything.
Pretty much everything Cora does is instigate fun character interactions, and I appreciate that quite a lot. She could easily be insufferable, but she's really good. I probably have the least to say about her more than any Blade, but I appreciate what she does do enough to rank her this high.
You know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?
Eletra easily had the potential to be the worst character in the entire game. Her voice lines sound like they would be mind-numbingly repetitive. Her voice sounds like the voice of a character I would hate, and her design is a straight-up mess. In spite of those disadvantages though, her quest is pretty good. Her learning to control her powers is a pretty neat premise, and it inspires some cool character growth.
But hey, that's just a theory, okay?
Praxis is a significantly better character than Theory in my eyes. She's just brought down a lot because Theory kills the mood. She'd be at least a dozen spots higher if Theory was a better character after being reawakened. I'd say Blade Sharp Memory is one of the strongest quests in the game, Blade Quest or not. A lot of the Blades that I love have the same interesting utilization of how Blades and their memories work. It's an interesting conflict, even if not much interesting happens after it's resolved.
Number 15.
Ursula's quest is notorious for being mechanically tedious. It's generally despised for this, and while I don't refute that point, in terms of story, bearing her soul is not bad at all. A story about a character becoming more self-assured and pursuing their passions is something that I like, and this part of the quest is well executed. Sadly, since the mechanics of this quest are a large part of its structure and pacing, it's a bit lacking, which is a shame because Ursula is the most wholesome character in the game. I really like how Barry serving as part of her design gives this shy little bean a big thing to hide behind. That's nice thematically, even if it makes no goddamn sense in the established lore. That question is honestly one I'm fine to excuse. In this case, at least.
Poggers!
Corvin is cool. I have nothing really to say on him because he's legit just a cool character, and that's all he really is. My feelings on him are entirely uncomplicated, so I have nothing to say. Zenobia has been a consistent favorite Blade of mine for a long time. I really like the premise of her affinity chart. It's a good excuse to hunt unique monsters down and test the player's skills. Sadly, it lacks a lot in execution because XC2 lacks any features that could help you track down unique monsters. It turns what could have been a fun excuse for exploration into hours of checking the wiki over and over again. I hate consulting guides period, so when I have to do so incredibly often to get to Zenobia's skills, it takes me out of the game in a major way. I do still really love Zenobia's quest though. Unleashing an ancient monster just to get a good fight is a great concept, especially when you take into consideration the major power creep in this game. Zenobia's personality is simple and just a ton of fun.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Peruna's pretty cool. Her gimmick of being passionate about justice is pretty standard. So standard in fact that they pair her up with the two Blades that have this exact same central character trait for a DLC quest. However, the thing that makes Peruna stand out is that her justice is motivated primarily by care for the people hurt by villains. Percival takes up vigilantism as a form of penance and seeking vengeance for acts already done. Godfrey is entirely reactionary and his sense of justice kind of feels directionless. Peruna, meanwhile, actually wants to help people for entirely selfless reasons and is proactive about doing good. She even sets up a self-sacrifice play against her villain. Speaking of which, holy crap, this guy is one of the best quest antagonists in the game. Trying to make artificial blades with children as test subjects is crazy, but it makes a slight bit of sense. The old factory was shut down, so nobody knows how to make artificial blades other than Torna, Tadazo, and the Tierkin in the factory, all of which I feel wouldn't talk, especially to this guy. He also seems to be motivated by spite towards Tadazo and his accomplishments, so he would never turn to him to figure out how artificial blades work. He's delightfully sinister, and I absolutely love it. He really gives Peruna a lot to play off of. Pretty much the worst thing I can say about Peruna is that her voice acting leaves a lot to be desired, and that hurts my ability to be invested in her, especially with her ambient voice lines.
Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
Vess is a terrific example of the features of the world of Allrest and the unique story opportunities therein. Vess takes terrific advantage of a less spoken attribute of Blades, that being their lack of apparent aging. She went from Abin's partner in battle to his caretaker because he ages and she doesn't. This concept is a brilliant exploration of established canon around Blades, and it also provides a sense of history to Vess. Both the quest where you help her driver before he dies and her Blade quest, you explore her history. Vess's story is extremely tragic. In his final moments, Mabin beckoned her away so she wouldn't have to watch him die. Mabin's kids also now know that Vess is the blade of a new driver, and she doesn't remember them anymore, despite being like a second mother to them. The only problem about Vess that I can point out is that her rice balls being called dumplings is pretty bad, but that is nowhere near the worst dovism I've ever seen, especially around rice balls specifically.
Anything you can be, I can be greater. Sooner or later, I'm greater than you.
Daggus is a blade that I didn't like very much upon first impression. I got him early in the game in my first playthrough, but I had enough other blades to not feel like using him. I barely understood affinity charts, and I didn't even know blade quests were a thing, so I never wound up doing his blade quest or heart to heart. His voice lines from sending him on merc missions and never using him in battle led to me having a shallow impression of him for a while. Now that I actually understand him though, I think he's a ton of fun. Daggus proclaiming himself to be a king is a fun setup for his character, and it's a lot less shallow of a gimmick than I first thought it was. He was awoken with this as part of his memory, and he pursues it because he feels that it has to mean something. I also like how his gameplay serves his arc. He's by far one of the worst blades in the game when you first awaken him because he's being lazy. He doesn't want to put in the work, so he's really bad. Then, after he finds a sense of purpose in his blade quest, in terms of both the game's code and personality, he is a whole new blade. His chart is different, with him having actual field skills and better stats. Xenoblade tells its story through gameplay in a lot of interesting ways, and Daggus is a fantastic example of that.
Let's go, lesbians, let's go!
Shiba is a character I like for a lot of reasons. First, she has a lot of common with Daggus, which is a character I already like, with the difference that her arrogance is put in check by misfortune a lot more than Daggus, making her a lot funnier and also significantly more grounded. Hell, Daggus is actively rewarded for being a stuck-up asshat a lot of the time. By the end of Shiba's Blade quest, she's a lot more humble. I also like that Shiba's chart has the consistent demand of gold, and all the gold you spend on her is actually a plot device in her Blade quest. That's pretty damn smart. You also actually make a profit off her quest if you see it through. I feel like not a lot of other games would give you that if you had to invest that much gold. Shiba is also very clearly gay, which I appreciate. I'm certain the main reason the term harem is never used in the English dub is that it would have turned this scene from being wholesome to being 51 flavors of fucked up. Percival has a really great backstory. His old life coming back to haunt him in his quest is a great exploration of not only blades losing their memories when being reawakened, but how they change with new awakenings. Him coping with the shame of a past he can't remember is interesting, and I like how the ending of his quest is a little bittersweet. It's a really interesting take on vigilante justice. His voice is also really cool. I don't think Percival would be nearly as compelling without Carrie Shale's performance. I like how Gorg's quest naturally shifts from a pretty generic quest line to something incredibly specific to Gorg. It starts about being recovering paintings, but it continues on into Gorg following his dreams and opening a bakery. I think it's evident by this point that my favorite blade quests are the ones where the situation is specific to the blade at the center of it, and Gorg is a really good example of this. His love of sweets was made evident in his heart-to-heart, and giving him the chance to pursue it in this quest is just plain good execution. I do have the minor gripe that after his quest, Gorg doesn't stop appearing in Garfont Village while inactive, but instead at his shop. They do the same thing for Adeline, so I don't understand why it doesn't happen for Gorg. In conclusion, I like Gorg. A lot of deciding the order for this list came down to me moving him up when I realized I liked him better than the characters I initially ranked him under.
Number 6.
Crosshead is a really cool character. Characters with high energy tend to be my favorites, and that trend holds true of Crosshead. She has a cool narrative about trying to prove herself, and I absolutely love it. I love how her quest builds off the scenes you get from her skill level ups. It's really neat when blade quests use details like this to build up the quest. It helps a blade and their stories feel like they have a place in the world, which is something a lot of blades I love have. Anyways, Crosshead is 11 out of 10. Better sapphic representation than Shiba.
So then the doc says,
Can't you see that killer view, bro Mark?
Finch is easily one of the most lovable characters in Xenoblade 2. Her design is just plain good, and she's got such a sweet personality. Finch's primary strength in her writing is that the characters around her don't ever blow up at her. Nobody has to go through the arc of learning to be patient with the disabled character. As someone who is autistic myself, that's a trope I hate, and I'm glad that Finch dodges that entirely. Finch's joke of having a bad memory is also just flat out hilarious. This is a joke that easily could have outstayed its welcome, but with Finch, I never find it not funny. Long live Bromark! Remember how I said Cosmos is basically Harold but worse? I'm gonna elaborate on that now. One of my favorite traits about Harold is that she has a history prior to her awakening. This is an aspect that I consistently really love, and Harold is probably the best execution of this. Harold's history motivates her decisions from the moment of her awakening. To earn any of her skills, you have to view the heart-to-heart where she pledges to the King of Tantal to control her power. I also like how her blade quest takes advantage of established world building when she flees into Spirit Crucible Elpis. Harold stifles her emotions in an attempt to control her power, but begins to allow herself to feel them when she realizes she has friends to keep her in check. That's just a very nice lesson for her to learn, and I like how in Merkle Bay's Mightiest, she's given a kinship with Elektra of all characters. A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one.
Could I interest you in everything, all of the time?
Adeline is a blade I wound up liking quite a lot, because I have consistently gotten her as one of my first rare blades in every playthrough I've done. Sadly, that means I never saw her personality very deeply, because all the interesting stuff about her is in her blade quest, which is hard to unlock and can only be unlocked near the end of the game. It's a shame too, because Adeline is a very fun character. Her love of knowledge is a great excuse for world building, and I like the premise of her trying to translate old books to find artifacts and finding all the high-tech information in the world tree. It's also neat how the conclusion to her quest has a real effect in the world, with her becoming an NPC in the world tree when out of the party. She also just has a bunch of really fun voice lines. Wolfrack had the potential to be one of the most generic characters in the entirety of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but he was just a sleeper hit for me. He looks like a pretty simple monster, but he is actually pretty complex. I like how he's trying to be helpful despite his appearance. His heart-to-heart gives different scenes with insight into his feelings about how he looks when he tries to help people in Fonset. Him trying to help despite being seen as a monster is the impetus behind his quest, and I love how its conclusion is basically, what if not violence? Wolfrack is a nice contrast to personality and design, and like a lot of blades I like, there's significantly more to him than that gimmick.
Rock, pleased to meet you.
I'm gonna be perfectly transparent here. The entire reason I structured the rules the way I did is so I could put Rock at the top. Rock got the shaft hard. He was only really story important for Chapter 3. Then, when Van Dam died, Rock returned to his core and he was given to Rex. Rex then had to awaken Rock to stop some bandits in Chapter 4, and then Rock is not in a single story cutscene from that point onward. Rock doesn't even appear in sections of the game where Rex and Pyra are separated and Rex uses Rock's weapons for crying out loud. Rock also gets the shaft in how he doesn't get a blade quest or any side content aside from his heart-to-heart. He suffers from all the same troubles as Aegean, but to a far worse extent, because Rock is at least important at some point. Egon is so incredibly unimportant that his inclusion feels like an afterthought. Rock, meanwhile, is a main character who was shunted to the background and doesn't get a blade quest, which is insulting in the nth degree because he has a series of quests linked to advancing his affinity chart. Every time you level up the Merc group, you have to get that level up by completing a quest. And every single one of Rock's key affinities comes from leveling up the Merc group. Yet, Rock himself is unimportant in all of these quests. Even Egon had quests where he was important. These quests should have had proper cutscenes in which Rock was given a focus. Rock's circumstance of existing is something that can only really be done with the mechanics of the World of All Rest. He lost his memories of being the blade of a deceased driver who has an incredible legacy. This is the perfect foundation for some amazing dynamics with other characters. Bridget's legacy is a major part of her character. She has passed down the royal line of the Ardanian Empire and is extremely important. Because of this, she's one of the few blades who's successful at maintaining our memories of past lives through journals, simply because of how important she is that they have to preserve the journals. This could lead to some interesting scenes where Rock and Bridget discuss what it's like to have drivers with such grand legacies. Just imagine a heart-to-heart between them like this. Rock could also have quite the interesting relationship with Nia. She would clearly feel responsible for Van Damme's death because she was too afraid to show the world that she's a blade to heal him. Imagine, every time she looks at Rock, she would feel crushing amounts of guilt because she could have saved Van Damme. This too could lead to some incredible scenes between the two of them, and we get nothing. We as an audience lose. He would also be incredible in the scene where Rex gets a pep talk from the rest of the party after Torna kidnaps Pyra and Mithra. It makes hell of a lot more sense if Rock was given the role Bridget had in this scene at the Inn in Theoswar. This goes double for the scene where the architect makes the party all confront their insecurities with shadows of their friends. A scene like this would be perfect for exploring Rex's feelings about being Van Damme's successor. It would be perfect if there was a scene at Van Damme's grave where a fake Rock yells at Rex for being a sorry heir to the Garfont Mercs. The writers of Xenoblade 2 made a plot device specifically for angst and neglected the greatest opportunity to give it. Deconstructing Rex's insecurities is the whole point of this scene, and Rock has the most to contribute out of anyone, aside from maybe Gramps. Rock being given the shaft, in the main story at least, is a perfectly understandable decision. The game already has a massive cast of main characters. Rex already has both Pyra and Mithra, so adding Rock on top of that would have presented some problems in writing, both in characters and in action scenes. The action sequences in Xenoblade 2 are incredible, but they would get hell of a lot more complicated to write with Rex having two blades out at once. How fighting with two blades at once works in the modern day is never really addressed in universe, and I'm guessing that this decision came in part from the writers not wanting to address it. If Rock stayed as a main cast member, he probably would have turned into another drum arc. But it's an incredible injustice to Rock as a character to not only drop him from the main story, but also to gut his side content. Rock was important to Garfont too, so dropping in that part of Van Damme after he dies just stops his sacrifice from feeling like it mattered, especially when at the very least, Morag and Bridget don't know who he is. In conclusion, Rock got a lot less than what he deserved. He's always been a fantastic character, and always will be. Well, I was not expecting this video to take so long to edit that it went from being something I could get done before the new year to being my first video of 2022. This video has legitimately been in the works for over half a year, and I'm relieved to have this concept that's been stuck in my brain for that long be done with. Anyways, I've been Pen, have a wonderful time, and goodbye.